Hello, everyone. All of my guests, can I ask you to unmute in the Discord chat?
Hey, hey.
Hey, David, how you doing? All right, so welcome to the third episode of our game analysis podcast. I am joined again by Joseph Jansen and Xavier Rodriguez, and our special guest this week is our professor, our VR professor, David Danley. He teaches both VR design and programming classes and game art classes at Ringling. And he's a super big Half-Life fan, and he's actually the first person to tell me to actually go and play this game. So I thought it would be perfect to have him as a guest on our stream. So, David, uh, is if there was anything that you wanted me to say about this game specifically that you're afraid I might miss, what would it be?
Uh, I mean, to be completely honest, like the biggest thing about Half-Life, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, if there was something I would say like you would miss out on is that if you play the original Half-Life and then play this, one thing that as somebody who's kind of played all of the every single one of the games, even Decay, which nobody has, that like this game is actually in many ways like I feel like a remake done right. It's a game in which quite literally they took everything that was really bad about the first Half-Life, which was pretty good. Like it was an amazing game for 1997.
I think it was
Um,
98 when the
oh yeah,
first one came
98.
out.
Yeah, sorry, I'm confusing another. But I
Another
mean,
first-person shooter.
there were like basically every game release was like a first-person shooter back then. But when 3D came out, everybody was just aping off of Quake and Doom and then Unreal Tournament after this game. But yeah, I mean that's a huge thing. Is that like it's one of those elements where they just took a lot of stuff and they weren't afraid to actually delete out things which weren't good, and then they were. But in other areas they weren't, such as a certain section and surface tension that you're about to play. So
Yeah. So I selected specific sections from this game that I thought represented the best. And the other
yeah,
goal was to not spoil it for anyone, so people would watch this stream and then go play it. Xavier, I know that you have done a little bit of background research on this game before you played it, but like all of the other games we've had on stream, you've never actually played it yourself. And Joe, I know that this one's on your wish list, but you haven't gotten around to it yet. So is there
Yeah.
anything you guys want to say before we jump into it?
Yeah. Let me actually give my thoughts on what I had seen of the game because I didn't play Black Mesa or the original Half-Life, but I've known about these games for a while because my little brother is a huge fan of the franchise. So I decided, to honor him, I would try to kind of go through a Half-Life 1 for about like an hour, just watch a bit of it, kind of see my thoughts on that, and then compare that to the first hour of Black Mesa to see kind of like what the differences were between, the original and the remake. However, um, 15 minutes into watching someone play through Half-Life 1, I fell asleep. Um,
Wow.
which is which I feel a bit guilty about because there was a lot to appreciate about the construction of the game, in terms of like the way it sets up the world and kind of its story. I thought that was pretty interesting,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I
and
think,
that's one of the reasons it's one of the most successful games ever,
yeah,
and that especially cements it as something that's absolutely legendary in game design and game development history. Uh, I'm gonna go ahead and start the game so we can get into it, but Xavier, I encourage you to kind of complete that thought while this, loads in, and I might have to change the audio settings. I'm not totally sure. I did.
yeah,
We did do a sound test, but I just want to make sure that the music that plays at this specific segment doesn't drown you guys out. But one
of
thing
course,
before you get on that is this is great. So in this tunnel, if you look straight out, you can see a subtle nod to the Black Mesa logo, which is the logo of the game, and I've included that right behind our names on this stream deck. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of point that little Easter egg out because that's really cool, and I'm glad they put it in. Go ahead, Xavier.
okay, but yeah, just to complete what I was saying, the reason that I mean, I believe I fell asleep. It's a bit hard to know, why I would do it, but to me, I think the reason was just because the early section of the game, just the general aesthetic of the Black Mesa facility, it felt very like grounded and it felt very industrial. And on one hand, that does like a phenomenal job at kind of setting this world up as like it feels like a real place that someone would work at. But I think just because of that aesthetically, it was a bit on the uninteresting side. And I think what that kind of leads into is just the point that like Half-Life feels like a game that was made to sell you on a world. It wasn't made to like wow you with these super stylistic or interesting visuals. And so I'm a bit conflicted because on one hand I think that it's really cool that they did that. But on the other hand, I am very much an aesthetic type of player. Like I really like to play games that have like these really unique visuals. So I mean those are just like my general thoughts, kind of what I saw of the game, both games actually.
I'm actually a little bit curious if you have ever seen the gameplay footage of Zen, or are you gonna find that out today?
Ooh,
I did show him that. I did show him that earlier.
He showed me a bit. So we'll get to that. I have like a general idea, but
Well,
Zen. Oh yeah, no, yeah.
The reason why I bring it up is that was part of this. So when Half-Life came out, like it's sort of the same experience I had with Half-Life 2. Probably the same feeling I feel like people that are much younger than me had playing Minecraft for the first time and realizing that you could actually build an entire environment. The physics system in Half-Life 2 was mind-blowing, and I've had the same experience in Half-Life 1, but it was because of the fact that it was a normal environment was actually kind of a shocker. Before this point, everything was like, it's Doom, but it's Doom in hell. You know, you're on Mars, and there's a bunch of demons everywhere. When you play Quake, you're fighting the Strogg, which are a bizarre alien race on somewhere like hundreds of years into the future. Like the thing is that almost every game that was of quality was like the most outlandish and completely insane thing you could possibly imagine. So like actually having, it had like crazy cutscenes, everything like that. So one of the things that was really kind of strange about this game was the fact that it just had a regular opening. You were basically a scientist going to your job.
And
It's
I love that you
weirdly
bring that up.
by proxy of that, it's actually one of the most original things that came out in 1997.
Well, yeah, and the cool thing about the character Gordon Freeman is that he is not a badass at the beginning of the game, and the only reason he's able to survive is because he's wearing this super awesome HEV suit that basically allows him to be a bullet sponge, as well as have a lot of other powers, like he can sprint a lot faster, he can jump a lot higher, and he can take fall damage better. And I think that kind of cements him as a really great character because he's just a normal guy in a really awesome suit. So you can relate to him as the player a lot easier.
Yeah, and another thing too was that later on, ends up really kind of, I feel like, cementing it, is that the actual alien design, when we start going further and further into the game, and then especially when you're introduced to the teleportation system, almost like the world presented is like incredibly unique. In fact, this sounds kind of strange, but like I can't really remember. I'm having a hard time remembering this. Like even the concept, which is now like the most cliche thing in the universe, which is floating islands. This is the first game I can remember that had floating islands. That had anti-gravity stuff. That had like these incredibly weird character designs that were so alien that they were unrecognizable. Um, so I mean, there was like strangely an incredible amount of thought and care put into the world building of this game that 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 really kind of set it apart from everything else. Because most sci-fi environments, even if you play like Unreal Tournament like 2004, they have absolutely no utility. They have no reflect. They don't reflect reality in any meaningful way, and that's one of those things that this game was so hardcore on that. And nowadays, I mean, effectively, you can't really get a job as an environment artist unless what you're building is as well thought out as it is from every element. Even if it's a fantasy universe, it has to be thought out in a way in which it actually makes some logical sense. You know, if there's a town, then where's the town blacksmith? Um, that the weapon and patterning and the wear on the weapons has to be a certain way to reflect how it would be used in real life, such as like an M16 having that I think it's like the blue and red sheen that happens from heat damage. If you heat up the steel over and over again, it discolors it and stuff like that in certain areas of the gun. Not really too much of a gun person, but I mean, it's things that I've had to like look up in order to like what happens to a really heavily used weapon.
See, I'm not a big fan of first-person shooters, but I think the weapons in Black Mesa and Half-Life were done so well that even you know playing Half-Life 20 years after it came out, I was like, wow, this feels really good. But then you told me to try Black Mesa, and I was like, wow, this is what it looks like when it's done to perfection.
Yeah, like another thing too is if you play the actual Half-Life multiplayer with like the most famous map, Crossfire, which is a massive deathmatch match where you can actually set off a nuclear weapon and everybody has 60 seconds to actually get into a bunker to keep from getting blown up. So naturally the doors start closing very slowly like in an action movie, and everybody's just basically shooting at each other trying to like cross this like no man's land and trying to jump inside of the actual thing. It's kind of hilarious to watch, and the gameplay in that still holds up. I think it's probably one of the few multiplayers that if I show it to people, it's like, oh, this is fun. It's not the best thing in the universe, but it's still way more fun than most other games from back then.
Alright, so while we're here on this specific part of this level, I just wanted to point something out at the top of this ladder. And anyone who knows me professionally knows that one of my favorite things is sound design in video games. And I just want to point out the most realistic and cool piece of sound design I've ever seen. So if you see the jets, they're about to bomb that building, and you see the explosion, you see the shockwave coming across the mountain, and then we hear it. I've never seen anything like that before, and it's probably my favorite moment in this entire level.
Yeah, that's one thing that a lot of games. Oh, I know. That's gonna be the part where you got a bit of a problem, because what's gonna happen is you're gonna jump forwards and you're gonna have the urge to like press backwards, and it's just because.
Well, Mario has
there's like a
trained me to
linear
do that.
fall off for losing velocity.
And also Mario has trained me to jump up in the air and then basically pull back on the joystick or the trackpad to make sure I don't fall into the pit on the other side of the platform.
Yeah.
At least we get to hear that awesome noise again, and then I die.
Oh wait, oh, you're still alive.
I have 2 health. There's no point. Goodbye, cruel world.
I would say once you get across it. Actually, I would save at the top there after each.
Yeah, definitely. So, Joe, I want to kind of hear your opinion. Like, what are you seeing that's different about this game, or what do you see from this game that you've seen done successfully in other titles?
I would say, it's interesting because I remember in high school, I did kind of an analysis on the Half-Life series during my freshman year. So the details are a little bit sparse, but I just recall like how, Half-Life in general just kind of cemented, like David said, it kind of cemented the genre of first-person shooters because it was one of the first few games out there that was successful, moving into a 3D like environment. So it was interesting just to kind of see how games have shaped over the past 20 30 years now, or 20 years now since this game has been out, and how they continue to take successful design elements from it, and you see that existing in other current existing products. The one thing I'm curious about is David, I mean this is a little bit off topic, but what was the biggest because I did some research about the Zen portion of Half-Life. What was kind of the main reason why people disliked it so much, and now they're praising it in Black Mesa?
Well, it's sort of half and half. So yeah, because a lot of people talk about like the game flows really well in the first section of Half-Life. I disagree. There's a lot of sections, especially the railway section, and there's the section that's at the end of this level. Quinn's gonna come up to it.
I'm gonna move over. I'm actually moving us over to Zen
now.
now.
Okay. But that's the thing, is that the problem with Zen has a lot to. So like, and the problem with Zen is that it slogs to a halt. You have low gravity now, so a lot of the rules of like the platforming get much more difficult. They're much more difficult to handle. And by the way, yeah, this is
awesome. This is really cool.
That's what I mean. Is that like it's almost like the entire game because they redid the entire Zen section.
I
It's
think
really
they
short in
redid the
Half-Life.
entire third act of the game.
Yeah, it's
because
now like several hours longer.
yeah,
And completely redone from scratch.
which is why when it was supposed to come out in 2009, it was actually delayed until 2020 because it took that long to create what we see here, and I think the wait was worth it.
Well, it had it had official release, and then it took an additional 3 to 4 years to work on this part. And what I really love about this is like I think honestly this one level, because it's really sad that's followed by maybe the worst level in this whole game in both Half-Life games, Interloper. They actually made Interloper worse somehow from Half-Life 1 to this. And in the next patch update, or I think like release of this, the Ultimate Edition or whatever they called it, they're going to literally delete out Interloper and then redo it again like a third time.
Hey, practice makes perfect.
Yeah, but you could tell it was much more amateur hour. And then you look at this, and it's like, okay,
wow.
this is more Avatar than like James Cameron's Avatar. This is better than the introduction of the jellyfish people scene in Mass Effect Andromeda. Like, this is legit one of the best scenes ever, and this is running on like an 11-year-old game engine. Like, this isn't even Source 2, I believe. Even if it is, like Source 2, they're definitely not using PBR all that much.
Yeah, they said it was a slightly modified version of CS:GO's variation of the source build, and I was kind of watching an analysis breakdown of this game before we did the stream. It was just kind of interesting to hear about how they had to deal with a lot of many frustrations with the lack of baked shadow maps or ambient occlusion, and just kind of come up with different like old school habits like blob shadows to help compensate for some of the withdrawals or negative or drawbacks. I should say drawbacks of the source engine.
And this is using Source 1, correct?
This this is not Source 2, not Source 2.0. This is like the CS:GO. This is like the CS:GO variant, the one before like I think Dota 2. Like this, so this is all using like the stuff that you would use for Gears of War 3 before we had like physical based shadows or anything else.
So this was before PBR.
Yeah.
And just so everyone who could possibly be watching that doesn't know what PBR means, it stands for physically based rendering, I believe. God, I make PBR materials all the time, but I'm always afraid I'm gonna mispronounce that because I always call it PB&J. But and that's when we have certain material properties such as metallic roughness and things have a little bit more of a realistic, I would like to say, finish on them. And that's something that recently came about, and a lot of the professors that we talked to at Ringling say like, well, see, we worked on this before PBR, which is always an interesting conversation because I wasn't around in the industry, I wasn't working before PBR, so when they say that they didn't have it, I go, that sucks. I wonder what that was like.
It was like not great. It came into existence around 4-ish years after I started. And yeah, working with specular gloss, like, I mean, it's a similar workflow, but honestly, this workflow is a lot easier. But also too that like just because in other words, it was just more difficult, and also too the problem is that there wasn't really such a thing as like your base color. You had a thing called diffuse map, and the diffuse map had the lighting kind of baked in, so stuff would look correct only from one angle. So. I'm oversimplifying it, but like essentially if you tried to put the lighting in a certain direction, it would just ruin the entire effect, and things looked way more plasticky. You couldn't get things to ever have correct surface. Like the reason why it's physically based is that it's now closer to reality. It's simulating reality much in the same way that you see movies do it, but now it's doing it in real time, which is why this was technology that it's hard to even find the history on it, but it's technology that has been pioneered by like Disney to try and make it easier to render movies photorealistically, because you could just now set stuff up in real time without having to wait 20 minutes for a physically based render to pop out and see if you did something wrong.
I have a question.
You can see it on the same frame.
I do have a question from someone in the audience. Deanna has asked, how big is the game map? So I'm assuming she's talking about the overall level map itself. So I can't really say because I've only played through this level once, but I feel like, David, you might have a good idea. If you had to translate what the map that we're currently playing on into Unreal units, which would be centimeters, what would you guess its, dimensions are?
Gordon moves like 200 some odd 4 centimeters per second when he's just walking normally. He moves very fast, like much faster than a human does. A lot of older games did that.
Yeah, didn't the Doom guy run like 32 miles per hour?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's part of the reason why. So it's just because in first person on a computer screen, it looks like you're going slower than you actually are. So I mean, looking at this almost, since a lot of it I'm not seeing. It might be looping around, but it could be as much as like maybe 40,000 centimeters, which is like multiple football fields.
And how does that compare to the standard junior curriculum biome?
The biome we have is only about 3,000. So it's
Wow.
it's also too that some elements of this are a lot easier to do because you technically don't have to make foliage. Like there's a lot of these reused rocks, but still, I mean, this is a Herculean task, especially like that entire skybox is. I mean that cube map. I mean I call it skybox because it's sort of how it does it. It has this really interesting like 3D rendering sky dome around it, but it just uses like a cube map rather than like a dome or anything like that.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I thought for sure that this was an older version of similar to an Unreal Skybox, and that they were using the Skybox to light most of the world because
It's
I can
actually
see
it's actually
that.
possible to it's really hard to describe it, but in like older Source games, or I mean almost every Source game, they would build a little tiny maquette, like a little tiny version of the level, and then they put like a 3D camera inside of it and then project it as like a render target like on the camera. So in other words, if you play Counter-Strike and like take a look at the buildings in the distance, you could actually no clip through the ground, fly around, and then find a tiny version of the city that you're standing in.
Wow. I remember I could do that in Simpsons Hit and Run.
Yeah,
Back in the
and
day.
that was like a really old technique because we used to have stuff like texture budgets we had to worry about because of all the B. But I mean, the big thing about this, I mean, the big thing about it is that this has a very old game design, level design sense. This is very much like when I played through it, I'm going like, wow, this actually feels like an updated version of something that would be released 20 years ago. It's kind of great. It's great to be reminded of what like an arcadey style game. It looks like everything being upgraded to like current day fidelity almost. Um, what that would look like. It's kind of fantastic, and yeah,
It's
the
also
things.
nice to jump back to the days of manual saving. Missed that.
Yeah, where everything's not just checkpoints.
Yeah, similar to, I think the first game I ever played that had manual saving similar to Half-Life was Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast.
Oh,
Oh,
not Jedi Academy.
no, I played Jedi Outcast actually first. I have another I have another question from the same audience member. She's wondering how the playable area versus the non-playable area. Like how big would the
Oh,
overall, I guess the, let's say, the
I mean, I would say
skysphere
each of these.
diameter.
I mean, I would say each of these islands, like, I'm looking at, they're about 20 feet wide. So I don't know why my brain isn't.
My
Just
brain
got
can't
done.
compute that one either.
Yeah,
Joe, do you have an
yeah.
idea maybe? Like an
It's
estimate?
about each of those little floating islands you're stating are between 600 to 1,000 centimeters.
Wow.
So yeah, the playable area, that's always a huge concern because all the non-playable stuff, you don't have to worry about it as much as the stuff the player can get close to. But I mean, one of the cool things about this world too is you can see that's healing you.
Yeah, I love that.
One of the big things is that with Zen's wildlife is that it's very high energy density animals. So or wildlife. So like literally, there's animals that will explode. There's things that have electricity coming off of them. Like these things can shoot sound waves.
Yeah, you mean I like to call these enemies Sonic the Bulldog because of
Yeah,
a piece of paper I found hidden somewhere in this level. I can't remember where though.
the hound eyes. But I mean, that's one of the big things too, is that in the Half-Life games, the AI is always actually kind of top tier. In particular, it's hard to see it because of the fact like they are super aggressive. But more, Gordon is actually insanely fast, has like a huge amount of health, so it's difficult for them to even fight you. But the thing is that, give you an idea, those hound eyes, they actually have a alpha hound eye and they have a non-alpha hound eye. So they actually have hound eyes that are alphas that will actually increase the amount of health of like the smaller ones.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, like if you actually take a look at it, there's one in a group that's always going to be bigger than the others. And there's like a bunch of these like really complex systems that were programmed back in like 1997 that I rarely see in games like nowadays, let alone like back then. They all have procedural, and none of that, they'll also like eat blood off the ground. They will do all sorts of really interesting little things. Yeah, I know this part here. Get ready for ichthyosaur time.
I do not like this.
Is there something in the water?
Yeah, there's a like a fish.
Oh.
It's a fish that is the size of a shark.
Yeah, I always avoid fighting them just because they're not very fun to fight, and you don't have to. They're like essentially optional enemies. They don't really drop any loot. They're and here's where we see a little flaw in the game design. Now this could be player error, but definitely frustrating that I have to go all the way back here to retry that jump.
Wait a second. Are you even supposed? Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, you're supposed to jump. So like you can't jump up there. You can't use a barnacle to get up there. You have to jump across, and then there's a little area where you can run, and then so they have it there. And there's a light.
What I mean is you take a look. There's that area, but look to your left.
Yeah, that
That's
place.
Much easier to get to.
Well, yeah, but you can. But you also are supposed to get to here, so you can plug in the. You're right.
Well, I mean, like, it's just one of those things where I don't even think you're supposed to go there. But yeah, I mean, they're actually, believe it or not, there's a few areas in service tension. There's a rope, and you actually can't climb up the rope. You can climb up the rope if you played opposing force, but you can't do it. You actually have to go around on a tiny little area. So.
Oh
like
yeah,
really
I know what you're talking about, and I remember being stuck on that for quite a long time.
Yeah, because in opposing force, there was actually a rope climbing mechanic that worked really well, believe it or not. So
was it one of the? Was it just kind of like a ladder climbing mechanic, in a way?
It actually had like physics. It would stick to you and everything like that. It was actually really advanced. Like there's one thing about this series is that it always was actually pretty advanced with a lot of its. This is kind of funny because like as time has gone on, it's kind of interesting to view this game as a horror game. Because we're gonna go into the horror section now.
There's actually one of my favorite enemies to fight, and it's the HEV suit head crabs in this specific level. And I love them because after you kill them, you can hear the flatline sound effect that happens when Gordon is killed in this game. So
yeah.
So
hey,
I
mean,
thought it was
they're still alive, sort of. If you don't know, the actual noise that they make, if you like slow it down and reverse it, he's actually screaming. I think please help me, oh god, and kill me.
Oh god.
Yeah, so they're actually trying to yell at you in English.
Oh yeah, you can.
Yeah, it's awesome. Really great.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like those small elements, like I feel like add a lot more to the universe than I think a lot of everything after Half-Life 2 did. Every single expansion just really kind of slowly added a couple of things, but like there was a huge amount of stuff introduced in Half-Life 1 and 2.
Oh,
and
I get what you're saying.
Especially Portal. Yeah, because there's like a huge amount of world building that happened even in Portal for the Half-Life universe, and even establishing that like aperture science. I mean, it's all done in post because of how popular Portal actually became. But yeah, it was like aperture versus which made washing machines versus the Black Mesa Corporation.
Oh, that actually reminds me, Joe, if you could check the Twitch stream chat on your machine. It looks like we have a question from someone, and it's too long for me to read while I'm playing this. So I was wondering if you could read it aloud to us, so we could try and answer that.
Yeah. So they're asking, is it more exciting as a VR developer to reimagine old games into VR, or to create new VR experiences with a fresh slate? Essentially, like what if this was like VR, you know, if this title was in VR compared to like.
Is it more fun for us to imagine old games or classic games as VR titles, or create our own unique VR ideas? You know, that's actually a really great question, and I'll answer that first, and then I'll let the rest of you guys pick it apart. I think that both are equally as fun. and I think it really just depends on the person. Like I enjoy designing VR interactions, but I also enjoy messing around with programming and creating normal games as well. I don't want to say normal games. I want to say, classic. I'll call them pancake games because they take place on a flat screen. I like playing games like that. So, when it comes to designing those kinds of experiences, it's fun. It's fun to design both VR experiences and classic experiences. But what the point of this show is to play, some of these classic games and then discuss how we would turn them into VR titles, to kind of open up the thoughts of VR development to non-VR developers, game art students and I guess non-developers in general, so just standard people who have an interest in games and game design. So that's my answer to that question. Joe and Xavier and David, if you have a different answer or you want to jump off something that I stated there, I'd be happy to hear your input.
Well, I mean, just to get started on my own thoughts and opinions, I feel like I think personally there's merit in kind of going either way with VR, whether it is taking a game that was originally a pancake game, as Quinn so eloquently put it, or whether it is to make like your own creative new project. I think either one kind of has like um, its own sets of like challenges, difficulties that make kind of doing each other like a different process. I mean, as long as the VR is like actually changing the game to fit into VR, because like you look at the port of Skyrim for VR, and I've never played it personally, but from what I've heard of people describing it, it feels almost kind of like a half-hearted attempt just to use the medium for the sake of
It feels like a cash
spectacle.
grab.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it feels like it was done because VR was something new and something unique. It was just kind of taking advantage of that. But I feel like if you feel that there's a game, especially first person game, that because those are the games that really feel like they work best when being integrated into VR. I think there's totally merit in just seeing how you could change the game to work in this new medium, just as much as there would be in making like a whole new experience that really takes advantage of the craft.
I like that. That's a good statement. David, do you have an opinion on that,
Uh,
or Joe?
well, I think probably the biggest thing for me is that like the reason why is that it's just cheap and easy for them to actually. I mean, it really is. Like you have an existing game, all you have to do is worry about the systems design and then modifying what's already there. With like older titles, the problem I kind of have with it is that um, as a medium, I feel like I'm always of the mind that like we should be going forwards. Like I really don't like sequels to anything like movies. Like it's just almost like a lot of times unless it's actually like has merit. It's like I won't even watch like the sequel of a film. I'm not really interested in something like Avengers Endgame or any of the movies leading up to that. So I mean, it's sort of the same way as a lot of games. Is that you know the the thing is that's like the idea has been explored, and then the second game will maybe improve upon that. But to just take like already an IP that exists, and then now we're gonna like try to convert it into VR, even though like if the game is a really good game, it probably was never intended to be designed for VR, like its mechanics, its universe, and everything else. And that's sort of the thing about this game is that one thing VR does not handle especially well is extremely fast player movement. And the thing is that Quinn's going at a brisk pace, but you guys probably have seen people speed run this game. Like I run at full speed throughout this, and it's very unless you do like some major redesigns, it's not very good. It's not
Yeah,
really
you'd have
like
to redesign all of the maps, all
you
of
would
the
have to
levels in this game.
redesign the game, the movements. Yeah, because like some of the puzzles require platforming as like an essential part. Like this is one of the games that really like hammered home the idea of like we really like first person platforming, even though nobody else does.
Yeah. And I'd say I'm probably the same mindset as you, David, with wanting to continually ideate new either it's new game ideas or new series in general. I think there's merit, especially with games such as obviously like Half-Life or other well-renowned titles that it's nice to kind of go back and remake them, like the Resident Evil 2 remake, which originally was done with fixed cameras back in 1998, and it's now using the third-person gameplay standard that became common from Resident Evil 4 and onward. But for me, I think I'd like to see a continuation of more new ideas being churned out. I just think it's better just to think more as a creative critical thinker that way, because you're coming up with a new idea that could potentially be just as marketable as Half-Life.
Yeah, because otherwise we end up like the movie industry, which at this point I feel like, at least when it comes to AAA, we're already there. Like they've been now remaking and effectively just re-releasing Grand Theft Auto 5 for years now. They've been re-releasing like Destiny, like we finally discovered the magic thing where it's like, well, now we don't have to create any new ideas. We could just sit on the same idea literally forever.
Oh no.
So
Did I just soft lock the level?
Crouch down and look under it and see if you can grab
No.
it. Yeah, you totally did.
Stuck.
You're gonna have to no clip.
Is there a console command for that?
Yeah, hit the tilde key and type in the word no clip as one word. Unless I don't think you have it turned on. So yeah, I think you have to like reload reload wherever you were.
Is there
just hit quick load. Quick load is F7.
Oh my god. Wait, F7. Here, wait, hold on. We'll load back to this specific autosave. So we had to restart the level. I soft locked it. Awesome. So soft locking is what happens when, a user does something which makes the level unpassable, meaning they throw an essential item, which is what I just did. They throw an essential item out of the boundaries of the map, so it is unretrievable, or I'm trying to think what I guess sometimes when the developer forgets to program in an essential piece of information, causing the logic of the level to soft lock. So say if I were to shoot that and nothing exploded and I couldn't get up there, that would be another example of a soft lock. So
or,
a lot of
doing things out of sequence too. That's 99%.
Anything that halts progression.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just do this correctly this time. That's what I was supposed to do. Instead, I went up there and I threw it down, and it ended up clipping through this rock. So
it's because the person who made that rock. It's a concave shape, like Pac-Man's mouth. So concave means that physics. You can break a physics system by like putting something in like a bucket. So it's two different collisions. So there's a chance that it like bounces up inside the other object, because computers can tolerate a ball, but it can't tolerate a bucket very well.
Got it. Alright, well, we made it through, and here's the piece of paper with Sonic the Bulldog, Mr. Burns, which are the explosive ones. I'm not sure what this bite crab is, and I haven't fought a spit squid either. But Sonic the Bulldog, I'm very familiar with.
Yep, there's.
Oh my god! Did you see that?
Oh yeah,
that was amazing.
I don't think you can. Well, actually, wait. Yeah, you can kill them in this game. Oh yeah, that's right. They're invincible in Half-Life 1, but you can kill those plants in this game.
Whoa! Wait a minute. Wait, what was that gun right there? Wait a minute. You cannot just bypass the crab claw of destruction and not.
So the way that this gun works is I shove my fist into the rear end of it, and it makes a little squeal when you first pick it up. And it's a hilarious gun because it regenerates its ammo because it's a living animal. So when I shoot all of my rounds, you can watch them regenerate.
That is simultaneously disturbing
and awesome
and yet intriguing.
I'll use it just for you, X. There's another weapon that I really like to use, and I call this the deconstructor ray, because it just vaporizes everything.
Yeah, the Tau cannon. Or I mean, actually, wait, is it Tau cannon? I don't know why my brain just like forgot what that is called, but it's because like when I played multiplayer matches, that weapon was banned. It was way too overpowered.
Yeah, no way would that work in multiplayer.
Yeah, so like it was usually a meme. It was a meme where people would get it. It's funny because the one that you actually have in this game is way less awesome than the ones in Half-Life 1. It basically has a loud ear-piercing shriek as it just vaporizes everything it hits. It's kind of amazing, and yeah, it was a meme in a lot of multiplayer maps. You put it in an area where it's impossible to get to, so it would just be like on a platform, and it had like an invisible wall around. If you jumped towards it, you just fell down to your death, and there was no way to ever get it in the game.
Hey, I really don't like these enemies. They bother me.
So David, one question I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you've been following with the other Half-Life inspired projects, but are you familiar with Project Lambda, which is kind of a recreation of, again, Half-Life, but in the Unreal Engine?
I mean, I've heard of it. It's just that I don't. I feel like is it actually just Half-Life 1 in Unreal?
I believe so. Just from what I've been reading, it's still in very early. It's like a very early alpha stage. But from what they've been discussing in these articles, it's like them just understanding how they could bring the environments into Unreal, and they're just doing basic prototyping of the levels. They've only really have the first level actually complete, and I think they're taking a break at the moment before they go on and continue to recreate the other portions.
I mean, the problem I would have with that is that, especially after going through this, like it's night and day just how different, especially these sections are. Like it's I would consider this to be more canon at this point than the actual like Half-Life 1 is, just because like this is almost in every way objectively better. So I feel like almost like them working on Half-Life, like trying to remake Half-Life 1 a third time, because this was made in response to how bad Half-Life Source was. It was
Right.
just a straight port where they copy pasted everything in. I mean, I would rather to see people maybe take the original ending to Half-Life 3 and try to recreate that.
I would like to see someone just try
that got
and like.
leaked.
I would just like to see someone try and finish the trilogy and make Half-Life 3 an Unreal Engine. If I were to work, if I were to be asked to work on a project and someone came to me and said, "Hey Quinn, we want you to work as a technical artist on the remake of Half-Life 2 in Unreal Engine," I'd probably say, "Well, of course I'll work on it, as long as you're paying." That's the first thing I would say, and then the second thing I would say is, "Why aren't we making Half-Life 3 and writing our own story and making our own game?" Because the creators of Half-Life have made it clear that if another company wants to try and expand on their ideas, which this game is a individual, like an indie developer company making a better version of Half-Life 1, they will allow them to release it commercially. So if someone really did want to create Half-Life 3, I have a feeling that Valve might let it slide. And they might even put it on their platform to sell it.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. It probably, I mean, a big element here too, guys, is just that the Half-Life story is, I feel like people really take it like super extremely seriously. Like, and the thing is that it really doesn't seem like every time I've ever seen interviews or like see Mark Laylaw and other people talk about that's like that it's super important that everything is necessarily completely consistent. So I mean, it's a thing. It's a game about time travel at its core, and teleportation, and weird aliens, and like planets that have. Again, they can literally explode when you shoot them because of how energy rich the life
Environment
is in this
is,
planet.
yeah.
Yeah, on
I
Zen.
like that's pretty cohesive too with a lot of the enemies.
Yeah, so that's why like the teleportation stuff happens like naturally in the environment in Zen, but doesn't happen on Earth or anything. So I mean, that's one of the big things about this. That is really just. Why do you have to kill them? They're like cute.
I don't know. They make
They go
fun.
poof when you hit them.
Yeah, they make funny noise. Oh, by the way, Joe, if you could check the YouTube chat, we do have another question, but David, feel free to finish that thought.
Yeah. So basically, it was just kind of one of those things where, even like it seemed like even when they brought them back to like rewrite sort of the entire lore of like what was going on in episode 2, like these games were intended to be multiple episodic content. Like with episode 3 finishing up the Combine by flying the that ship, the one that shows up in Portal 2. That thing ends up, they pilot that. They basically Tokyo drift it into the Combine planet. They also and blow it up because you hit something with this going at the speed of light into a planet. They have one where Adrian Shepard returns and he works with like that was one of the canceled episodes. So it's never really intended to have a conclusive ending to the series. It was never really so. I would say that yeah, like they would be more than happy to see people do something interesting like this. Like, this is great. Like, I love how, interesting this world is. But yeah, get to the what was the question?
Yeah. So the next question that was asked was like, what's the significance of the color choices? And do you have to is there any like certain hues you have to avoid when building VR games to avoid like things such as eye damage, or does the headset filter that for you? That was one of the questions asked.
I believe when you're actually wearing a VR headset, because we're no longer using CRTs. At least we haven't used them for 14 years. I wear glasses because of CRT damage, since they emitted radiation into your face. But the funny thing about it is that, at least as far as I know, there have been reports of people getting like permanent eye damage, but like nothing consistent. Like, in other words, it's like a really spurious link. Um, I would say that one thing that really sucks is like being in an extremely bright environment. Like, if you're surrounded by just flat white, that does
Yeah,
not
and that
Mhm.
tends to
feel
happen a
good.
lot with Quest builds, I've noticed.
Yeah. That's about the only thing is that with lighting. With this, you can see that the lighting is being used in the way to direct the player,
Yeah.
like red and orange.
Shit.
What
sorry,
are those?
sorry for the profanity. I don't like these. I mean, like, I understand their purpose,
Exploding
but
hound eyes.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they go poof. Like I said, everything is just dripping with just, yeah, all the animals are explosive, basically. All
Yeah.
the like crystals are literally glowing and electrified.
I never thought about it, but what you said about this planet, Zen specifically being a high energy planet, meaning a lot of the, wildlife, flora and fauna a lot of it explodes or, something similar is really interesting to me. I never thought about that playing
Yeah,
the
there's
game.
a lot of things under the hood that never get explained, and I feel like it's almost like sort of the appeal that a lot of people have for Dark Souls, where it has like a lot of not very. It doesn't tell you a lot of information about stuff, but yeah, the fact is that this game actually that was the original plan, so they took a lot of the designs that were never added to Half-Life and actually realized them into a game. Like,
Wow,
there was a lot of stuff
that's
from
great.
Half-Life 1 that they remade for Black Mesa and incorporated into the game for the Zen levels.
Oh, and
It's
by
like
the way,
those exploding plants and those exploding hound eyes are never in Half-Life 1.
David, just so we know, the reason I am moving so slowly through the level is to prevent people who may be photosensitive from getting too overwhelmed by all of the colors featured in this environment.
Oh yeah.
And my mother watches this show, and she gets motion sick very easily, so I'm trying to reduce the possibility of her getting any sort of simulator sickness from watching us play a game.
Yeah, no. PC games with a mouse and keyboard have no slow in or slow out like
Yeah.
you do with the gamepad, so it's a lot. That's a
Yeah,
lot really
and this is-
irritating when you start doing 270 spins and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is why I'm trying not to like speed run this level in any way.
So
Yeah.
like speed ran it. I actually climbed up one of those mountains and jumped to the end of this level. So everything you've been doing, I actually skipped over it the first time I played it.
Since we have about 15 minutes left, I'd like to transition us, this is really funny that I'm doing this because we just talked about how this game shouldn't be in VR. We're going to talk about how we would turn this game into a VR title. And since we've kind of already covered why we shouldn't, because, it's a high octane movement, I don't want to call it a direct movement shooter because that would be something more akin to Titanfall or Call of Duty, the new Call of Duty games. I want to say, like, what certain things could we take from this experience that would be successful in a full recreation, a full VR recreation? Like, say we were hired by Crowbar Collective to create a VR version or a VR port of this game. What is kind of the things you would be thinking about as a designer, and things that you would definitely be trying to avoid as a designer? And this is open to everyone who is a guest on the stream. So feel free to throw any of your crazy ideas forward about how you would handle certain gameplay mechanics, lighting, level design in this world.
Ichthyosaurs don't really work. The water mechanic doesn't really work. However, I think almost everything in the Zen level could actually have an analog where it could work in VR. Because you fall slower due to the lower gravity, that actually works a lot better. Which, funny enough, that means that like the element that people hated about Zen is actually really helpful because falling in VR is off-putting. Those things that shoot you up into the air that you're jumping on work really well because you float very slowly. Versus the real life stuff, I feel like the stuff that you have that's in real life is actually a lot worse. I feel like it doesn't work nearly as well in VR, especially the section we didn't get to, but the trip mines. You have to jump over trip mines in order not to set off a nuclear bomb. Which it's one of those things that doesn't make sense logic-wise.
Oh,
'Cause
you're
if you have a
talking
nuclear...
about the section in surface tension where you walk into the hallway and there is a ton of mines. I would just
Yeah,
also
and you
like to
got...
mention that I did pivot to a different level because we got to the point in Zen where I had stopped playing and I hadn't replayed it in time to do a playthrough of it, so I didn't want to get stuck on anything. So I went back to a very early level in the game to kind of show the interior of the Black Mesa facility just after the resonance cascade was activated.
Yeah, and so like that's kind of the big things here is that there's like a few principles. There's like a really good article about like the principles of game design for VR, and like there's certain things like people want to explore the area. They want to move slowly. Like Zen is a very high detail environment with a lot of fauna. Horror experiences work really well. Something like this, where it's like these sort of sparse environments, having to dodge these like turrets. A lot of the enemies that are coming at you are ranged, so a lot of the soldiers with their assault rifles immediately get right in your face, and you have nowhere to run and hide.
It'd be too
So
overwhelming.
in other words, it's way too overwhelming. So like a lot of the stuff that's actually introduced into Zen, I feel like is actually would work better just because it plays into the strengths of being immersive, being slower paced, being whereas like on Surface Tension, a lot of the levels you have to like basically be running around at like really, really fast and dodging people, and you have like no cover. And Half-Life Alyx had to like reduce the difficulty of all the enemies. They
Yeah.
had to make them move slower. And even then, you get overwhelmed because they get really aggressive.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they tried to take with Half-Life Alyx. One thing that was unsuccessful is like they kept the really intelligent AI that was the Combine and the Marines in the first game. And one thing playing in VR that I can do in a normal game, but I can't do when I am playing a VR title, is react in time and run away when an enemy rushes me while I'm hiding in a corner. I mean, I guess, right, judging by what just happened there, I can't do it in a normal game either, but I'm just bad at games.
No, it's that like there's a video you can look it up, but like the AI is actually smart enough that it will try and flank you. If you start reloading, they will start attacking you. If you're in an area of two corridors, two of them will attack you from the front, the other one will run around to the side of you to try and come up behind you. If they have a unit with a shotgun, the shotgun unit will like come straight at you, and the other two will try and move to the side of the snipe. So there's like a lot of extremely complex behavior that you could actually that people have discovered with like how the AI, especially in Source 2, are, because the AI in Half-Life, I mean in Source 1, whereas Half-Life 1 the AI is kind of dumb. Like there just wasn't enough the engine wasn't powerful enough to make those like really complex decisions. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because I got overwhelmed a lot playing Black Mesa on hardest difficulty, because it's just like the soldiers will just get right in your face when you're when you have no health, and they will get more aggressive as you get less and less health.
Yeah,
because they know you're injured.
Because they know you're injured. And they also will even call out to their buddies while you're they'll be like, he's reloading, and then they'll start to flank you. And I've come to fear hearing that.
Just shoot with the shotgun. It's fine. Well, actually, no. I think you can. There you go.
Oh, sick! I didn't know that you could do that.
Yeah, it's not like Portal where. Oh yeah, that's right. You can also in some areas you could pick them up and just point them at the actual aliens.
Yeah, that's always fun. Oh, I know. There's one like right over here. Hold on, I got a nade. Let's do this.
But yeah, that's one of the things that I wish they had completely removed, was that in the surface tension map, it's one in which there's a bunch of trip mines, and it's in a warehouse filled with rockets, explosives, bombs, TNT, and a nuclear missile. And it makes no sense why you would put all your arm a bunch of explosives near basically something that will blow every single person within a 3-mile radius up around you. I mean, it's an excuse for platforming, but it's an iconic moment from the game. But it's like kind of ruins the immersion, because who would be dumb enough to do that?
I'm trying to get these guys to set off this mine, but I don't want to do it myself.
No, I don't want to move.
I can't. Maybe I can.
Can you crouch?
Nope.
I was gonna say just throw a grenade at it.
Oh, it's G-Man. I saw him.
It's your
Sick.
boy GG.
Yeah, so one thing about Half-Life and Black Mesa that kept from the original is you'll see sightings of this guy called the G-Man, and he's essentially this dude in a suit with a briefcase. And I don't actually know anything about G-Man, even though I have played both Half-Life 1, 2, and Black Mesa. I still know nothing about G-Man, and I think that's just because I haven't looked up a lot of the lore videos that perhaps maybe you have, David. So, but
Well, the only thing to really keep in mind here is that in comics and outside media, from what I understand, the G-Man, he's an interdimensional being. He's not a human, which is why he looks so pale. He's basically the equivalent. I don't know if they got. I don't know where they got the idea from, but he's a gray alien. He's some type of an alien wearing human skin.
oh, that's horrifying.
Lovely.
He's also an interdimensional being, so he has control. Whatever his species is, they have control over time and matter, which is how you teleport 20 years into the future in the sequel. This is how in Half-Life Alyx well, I can't explain it, but you basically change the course of time at a certain point in the game. And so, yeah, that's about the only thing that is realistically known about him. I do know that that he was the one that orchestrated the events, because you actually see him talking to some people, and I think it's revealed in one of the later games that that Dr. Breen is actually like made a deal with the Combine, and that that G-Man's not working for the Combine, which you don't meet in this game, but they're the ones that are essentially staging an invasion of Earth with this other species called from the Creatures of Zen. It's a bit strange, but yeah, like that's part of the appeal of it, is that it's unknown. It's like the Reapers from the Mass Effect games until they explained it and then like ruined it forever.
Yeah, they were
So
like really scary when you didn't know what they were, and then now they're not anymore.
Oh, they are actually squids.
Back
they're big
to
sea squids.
back to just a few ending notes, because we do technically only have 3 to 5 minutes left of the stream, and then we'll do our outro essentially. Is there any closing notes that anyone would like to say about Black Mesa, or kind of what?
This is a better game than Final Fantasy VII Remake.
I saw that note. I saw that note.
This is a better remake than that game is, because that's not a remake. That's just I mean, it's not even a remake. It's just literally a sequel that is just bad, and they now remaking the remake. So I can't wait until it turns into Kingdom Hearts.
I mean, I bet Xavier would like that. That's his favorite game.
Gosh, I love Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah, but that's like trying to do Kingdom Hearts of Half-Life. Final Fantasy VII is not that game. It's not a goofy, silly game. What about the rest of you guys? Like, what's your final thought?
I'd like to. I guess the reason I picked the game is just because it's a really fun to play and first-person shooter, and it's kind of one of those. I would say that the original Half-Life is definitely one of those necessary titles for anyone who's into game design or programming to play, in order to kind of understand where the medium which we work in kind of began. And I think Half-Life or Black Mesa is a really good substitute if you don't want to play through Half-Life, because sometimes I know that the first few times I tried to play the original Half-Life after growing up playing games that look significantly better and play significantly better, is I got really motion sick while playing it, and that may be different for most people. But when I played Black Mesa, I finally kind of understood what everyone was talking about when they said Half-Life was so awesome. So
it streamlines a lot. Like, this game removes a lot of repetitive stuff out of it and makes itself like several hours shorter. It's like none of that is like worth keeping in. So yeah, this game really, I'd recommend this. This is one of the only times I'd recommend like the actual remake over the original.
yeah, I would recommend it as well, and I would say that playing this game for the first time was kind of like playing Call of Duty the first time my mom said I could actually play the game. I felt like wow, I can finally play this game. Except it didn't come with the disappointment after of kind of me going, oh, I thought this game would be something completely different, and it wasn't. And I still like Call of Duty, don't get me wrong, but this game was like that, except the game was actually amazing, and I was really happy I got to spend as much time with it as I did. and it's one of those games that's extremely replayable. So it's kind of really worth picking up and giving a try, especially since they, just finished it and there's only a few bugs left, like the ones we saw during the stream. So I think it's at a really good, place for people to start playing and talking about, just like they did with the original Half-Life. Joe and Xavier, do you guys have anything you want to add?
I would just say, I mean,
Yeah.
or go ahead, Xavier.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, don't make the same mistake I did and let human limitations prevent you from playing this game, from watching this game, from anything.
Are you saying that you've changed your mind?
I mean, I'm still not sure if I would actually be interested in playing this title over, say, like the second one, just because first-person shooters in general are just not really my genre. But I can say that I can really respect what Half-Life was trying to do, and that kind of like David's commentary about it has definitely given me a better perspective as to like why the game is the way it is and why that makes it like a pretty solid title overall.
Joe, you had one more thing to say, and then we can wrap this up.
Yeah, I was just basically gonna say it's just. I guess now this game is on my bucket list of things to do to play during the summer. Because I bought it during a Steam sale but haven't touched it, unfortunately. So after getting some more experience, just kind of sitting down and kind of digesting the game and what it's like, it definitely makes me feel a lot more excited to play it once time is available.
All right, and with that, um, we can end this stream. And David, I'd like to thank you a lot for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your Friday night to do our show. I hope that this experience was as great for you as it was for us. And we'd love to have you on the show again sometime. I'll give you the schedule so you can kind of pick and choose which episodes you'd like to be a part of in the future. But I just want to say I really appreciate you taking the time, and it was a lot of fun talking with you about this game. To everyone else who is watching, thank you for staying on for the entire stream. We had higher numbers than we did last week, so it looks like bit by bit the audience is slowly growing, which is great. I guess one more announcement is I've got a Oculus Quest 2 tutorial that just came out last week. So if anyone's interested in figuring out kind of how to use Unreal Engine 4 to develop for these newer mobile headsets, I have a tutorial that's pretty straightforward and pretty much anyone can figure it out. Absolutely. With that, anyone else has any closing statements or wants to say anything else?
Tune in for Doom next week.
Oh yeah, thank you, Joe. I'm so sorry. Yeah, so we are playing Doom next week, and we're bringing back Nick Wienerhold as our special guest on that episode. So we'll have him back next week, and I'm looking forward to that. So thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. So much information.